がる。じゃなければ将軍なんてやれないわ。主が誰なのか心に刻みなさい。泉州妖精の天撃将軍は。
Hey guys, MrPokke here, back with another video, and on today's episode of CN Unit Analysis, we are going to be taking a look at Feixiao, the latest general that's graced us in honkaistarrail, right? So without further ado, let's get into today's content. Subscribe! Okay, so for Feixiao specifically, I think she brings about a very interesting dynamic to the quote-unquote meta or the placements of where she would stand, especially with previous incredible DPSs such as Acheron as well as Firefly. So what she essentially brings to the table is we can kind of tell that MiHoYo is trying to bridge the gap between the version 2.x DPS into version 3, because Feixiao, as of this current moment, her single target DPS with her ultimates is currently pretty much the most uncontested single target damage in the entire game. Not even Acheron or Firefly, which are mainly destruction based, can match up to Feixiao's single target burst, right? Specifically with her setup with Robin, the follow-up team comp, her performance right now far exceeds expectations. As some might even say Feixiao is gunning for the tier 0 crit DPS slot with Acheron. Now, I'm not gonna be talking about like Feixiao's tracers, her kit, all that kind of stuff. If you wanna see how Feixiao specifically works, feel free to check out my previous early access review where I basically go through exactly how does a kit work. So I'm just immediately going to jump into the in-depth content, especially from the CN community, the numbers, the testings, as well as some potential different team comps that we could try, especially when it comes to the speed tuning. Because for Feixiao, speed tuning, maybe not exactly just for Feixiao, but for follow-up team, especially Robin, or even like units like Sparkle and Bronya, speed tuning is absolutely pivotal to make a good follow-up team comp work, right? With or without Feixiao, right? So we are going to go through all of that. Okay, so one of the very interesting mechanic that the CN community brought up is that Feixiao herself, her damage does not scale with the number of mobs. However, this does not mean that she has the inability to deal with mobs. So what this specifically means is that units such as Erudition, their damage numbers increases the higher the number of enemy mobs. An excellent example is going to be Herta over here. The more mobs that are summoned, every single time she does a skill, she's going to be able to increase the total damage output of that single skill, right? So this is where her damage will increase based on the number of enemy mobs. Whereas for units damage that cannot scale the mobs, so if you have a single ape or 2 ape, your damage will always be fixed at 6 over here. So the damage is going to be unchanged regardless of the number of enemy, right? So Feixiao, that is going to be a type of unit that Feixiao is going to be. Her damage is always going to be single target, whether there's 1, 5, 3, it is always going to be the exact same for this scenarios, right? That being said, this does not mean that Feixiao cannot deal with mobs. The reason being, Feixiao currently, her ultimate mechanic, you can in fact charge up with 12 stacks, so you could theoretically just pretty much one-shot any elite, and she does have a pretty considerable sort of like 转火能力, which is like the ability to change the targets based on your follow-up attack team comp, right? So you can in fact trigger Feixiao's follow-up to deal with the mobs quite easily, especially if you run her with units like Topaz, Aventurine, March 7th, Moza. All these units can help us trigger Feixiao's follow-up attacks to still deal with mobs, even though her damage is exactly the same, right? Her single target damage from ultimate or even her talent follow-up can quite easily deal with the mobs, right? That being said, her performance in pure fiction is probably not going to be the best, especially when it comes to content such as Apocalypse of the Charlotte as well as Memory of Chaos, right? These two content is where Feixiao majority is going to shine, especially Memory of Chaos right now. Currently in our environment, Memory of Chaos is so quote-unquote easy for Feixiao that she can zero cycle. She's one of the, if not the easiest units to perform a multiple different team worth of 0 cycles. So excellent unit so far. This might change in the future if we get different sort of Memory of Chaos environments, or even different Memory of Chaos blessings, or different Memory of Chaos blessings, but we'll have to see, right? So this is an example, right? Even for Aventurine, because there is, despite the fact that there are 2 targets, because Feixiao can trigger follow-up multiple times, especially with her allies, she can in fact roll a dice multiple times, right? So still pretty decent when it comes to mobs. Another important thing to note from the CN community is that Feixiao's damage stability is argued to be one of the more stable DPSs. In fact, one of, if not the most stable DPSs in the current environment. So an example of a DPS that's quote unquote not stable is probably going to be Scylla, because Scylla is highly reliant on her skills or ultimate killing the mobs, triggering resurgence, and getting additional turns more and more, right? So very low damage floor. You could go very low if you don't crit, but also an extremely high damage ceiling if you can trigger multiple resurgence and just deal an incredible amount of damage, right? So it really depends on not only your build but also the enemy environment. How many mobs are there that Scylla can in fact one turn kill? Another example is gonna be Yunli. Yunli's damage output, it is also a little bit volatile depending on her environment, because she will thrive in scenarios where the enemies hit her multiple times. If the more the enemies hit Yunli, the higher her personal damage is gonna be, and the more frequently can you trigger her ultimate enhanced counter to do an absolutely ridiculous amount of damage. Whereas on the other hand, unless you get like an E6 Yunli, if you're against enemy mobs that either just don't attack you or have a lot of, like, you know, the Scout DOT guy that just simply doesn't even consider it as an attack, that's when Yunli's damage is gonna drastically falter down, right? So these are DPSs that you could say that their damage stability is gonna be considered quite volatile, especially based on the environment. Whereas for Feixiao, she's said to be one of, if not the most stable DPS outputs, because regardless if it's gonna be 1 target, 3 target, or 5 target, the ultimate damage as of this current moment in honkaistarrail's endgame, she can one-shot pretty much every single elite right now with the current setup we have. That is gonna be Robin plus a support plus a Ventrine. She can pretty much one-shot every single elite. Sometimes you could even one-shot a whole boss, such as Kafka, using 2 ultimates back-to-back with the right debuffs, right? So her damage output is currently so high that regardless of the number of enemies, she's really not that dependent on the environment she's going to be facing. Her damage will be consistently high. You're always going to get a high amount of stacks because of your team building with Feixiao, and your damage output, unless you just miss your crits, is always going to be there, right? Not only for frequency, but also the total damage output. So you can say that Feixiao has a very stable damage output, and this might be a good thing, especially going forward in the future if we encounter more different scenarios, different environments, different enemies that could make some units stronger or weaker. An excellent example being Firefly. Right now, she's performing exceedingly well, but if in the future we encounter enemies that have, like, I don't know, some kind of like weakness, break efficiency, nerf, right, that you couldn't break as easily, then Firefly's damage is going to fall off the cliff. Or another example, if we're going to be playing, for example, the Jingliu, right? Jingliu, because of her Ventrine's dices, it stalls her by a lot, and when she goes out of the phase, her damage output drops down very much. Whereas for Feixiao, none of these things really matter that much. Her own mechanic is, as long as you give her enough stacks, her damage output is more or less always going to be there, right? Another thing to note is more or less a bad thing, actually. So that means that there is one bad thing about Feixiao, that is when you are using not necessarily Feixiao, but in a follow-up team comp. Feixiao and follow-up team comp while in autoplay, the targeting for the AI can be a little bit scuffed. So this is the AI priority in autoplay, right? First of all, they'll prioritize enemies that are very low to kill them as soon as possible. If there are no such enemies, or that all the enemies are around the same health, then they'll prioritize enemies based on their elemental weaknesses. If none of these criteria apply, then they're basically gonna hit the next best thing, right? Unfortunately, for our current follow-up team comp, you wanna merge all of their buffs and debuffs and allocate it to a single target, right? Your Topaz, proof of that, the vulnerability, Mose's Prey, where you get a 20% increased follow-up damage vulnerability. You wanna kinda stack on all these debuffs into a single target. And unfortunately for our AI, there's no such thing as prioritizing stacking debuffs, right? So they are not gonna make Topaz, Mose, or even if you're gonna use Ventrine's ultimate, it's not guaranteed that they will all land the same debuff on the same target. And when that happens, Feixiao's damage is definitely gonna be able to be negatively impacted, right? Because the buffs are all scattered all over the place, and you can only focus on one target at the same time, right? The name of the game in follow-up team comp is focus everything into one, spam all of your debuffs, and then you just pretty much just one-shot the enemy, and then you move on to the next unit, right? So in autoplay, players might find an issue where their Feixiao might not be as efficient compared to autoplay champions such as Acheron or even Firefly, right? So do take that into consideration. Okay, now with that being said, here is sort of like a damage examples as to why currently Feixiao is deserving of, in CN's opinion and the CN community's opinion, tier 0 crit DPS, because based on raw multipliers alone, she is currently the highest single target damage dealer we have in the entire game. So based on their rough calculations, with the right debuffs, right supports of Robin, Top, all that kind of stuff, theoretically speaking, you can hit close to 1 million damage per 100 action value, right? So what exactly does this entail? This means that every single time you hit 100 action value, you hit 1 million damage. In our current MOC 12 environment, this is the current MOC 12 in the Kafka side, their combined health pool of Wave 1 and Wave 2, it is also only at roughly 290 million. Then this means that 0 cycles of Feixiao, it gets exceedingly easy, because if you can add 3 times, which is basically equivalent to 300 action value, if you can add 3 times, you can deal pretty much more or less 3 million damage, which means that you are going to be able to one-shot the entire end game. This is factoring in her ultimate, her follow-up attacks, adventuring debuff, Tobes, all that kind of stuff, Robin's at the attack. This is going to be roughly more. So the team comps that enables Feixiao's incredible damage output, not just in raw damage numbers, but as well as the ultimate frequency, means that our current endgame content is quite literally too weak to handle the amount of damage that our Feixiao can do. And yes, this is talking about an E0 Feixiao, right? So as of this current moment, her damage numbers is definitely up there, one of, if not the strongest single target damage dealer right now, right before we reach version 3.0, right? So that is gonna be that. As a general rule of thumb, when it comes to the damage numbers coming from our DPS, one single Han unit's single target DPS is and should be roughly equivalent to a destruction's 1.5 times on a single target. Now, if there's gonna be 2 targets, then their damage should be very similar, right? Han 1 by 1, and then destruction got a little bit of AoE, so this should be around the same ballpark. And then if there's 3 targets, then destruction is gonna be able to be with the Han, and if there are 5 targets, then we are gonna be relying on erudition, right? So as of where it stands right now, Feixiao has already broke this quote-unquote ratio. Her single target DPS as a Han unit is literally equivalent to 2 destruction units single target DPS, right? So it is in fact even more than 2 times of a normal traditional destruction unit. I'm talking specifically about the 1.x destruction units such as Jingliu, Blade, etc. Right? So her damage numbers is absolutely going to be there. So in the future, the higher this damage number scale, because her baseline multiplier is already so strong, Feixiao's weakness, or rather her ability to get power crap, is not gonna be so easy compared to maybe our earlier versions of DPS, right? Especially when we go into version 3.0, who knows what's gonna come out, because when we got Acheron and Firefly, that completely broke the meta. So hopefully Feixiao can still retain her current damage standing with the 3.0 DPS, but even if she can't, that means that a lot of our previous 1.0 DPS definitely fell off a goddamn cliff, right? So that's gonna be that. Before we jump into the team building segment, we are gonna be talking about 2 main things for Feixiao. One is gonna be the damage multipliers, or like the distribution, and one is gonna be how do we achieve skill point positivity, right? So the damage distribution is basically how much attack, how much crit, how much damage percentage, how much of it is gonna be the optimal ratio in order to make our crit DPS deal the highest amount of possible damage. So for example, Jingliu has exceedingly high attack percentage from her talent, as well as the free crits that she get from the 50 crit rate, right? So for Jingliu specifically, she is gonna be able to benefit more from damage percentage, like your ice damage sphere, or your res downs, your defense downs, your vulnerability, right? So that is gonna be what Jingliu. So, and taking this example, Feixiao, you can kind of see she will have the highest attack percentage in a kit with the lowest damage percentage. Then the crit is somewhere in the middle. Then for your defense down, res down, as well as vulnerability is around the same. And this is gonna be every single round you move 1.44 times, right, with the follow-up attack as well as the ultimate. So from this glance, you can kind of tell that damage percentage would be more beneficial to Feixiao in general. So you can kind of take that into consideration when you're gearing here or building a team, right? That being said, it is not considered a very strong diminishing returns for Feixiao. So players might not need to worry about this that much, but just a little good to know. Another thing is, Feixiao also has this mechanic where her damage output is essentially also tied to her team, which means that the more frequent your team goes, the faster this stack is generated, which is exactly the same like how Acheron works. The faster you can generate slash rune for Acheron, the higher Acheron's damage output is going to be. So it would be in Feixiao's best interest to get teammates that could stack on this as much as humanly possible so that we can get the highest possible ultimate damage. But that being said, I've also tested a couple of other team comps outside of the traditional follow-up, and I noticed that because her raw damage numbers is so high, you could, as of this current member of Chaos 12, just run a normal hyper carry, like I'm talking like Robin with like a Run May or even Sparkle, Bronya even, because your multiplier is so high, getting the hyper carry setup for Feixiao where you might not even need a lot of ultimates, you literally just one-shot them, it can also be viable, right? That's how much damage it's going to be. I'll be showing you guys this a little bit later on, but that is going to be the concept required for Feixiao. And before that, we also need to talk about Feixiao's skill point positivity. Now, for Feixiao, unfortunately, or not just for Feixiao, but the entire follow-up team comp, their skill point distribution can be one of the highest in the entire game. Robin, she pretty much just never moves, she just casts a skill, and most of the time, if you're concerned about like clearing the fast speed, your Robin wants a little bit more energy, you're basically permanently spamming Robin's skill just so that we can get the ultimate before the cycle ends, right? So for Robin, she's already more or less skill point neutral or just skill point negative. Then for Feixiao herself, since she wants to use the skill very, very frequently, the remaining slot, basically your sustain and the second unit, you need them to be skill point positive. Otherwise, you're pretty much going to run out of skill points very, very quickly, right? So with that into consideration, between Topaz and Mark 7, these two are going to be the more skill point positive unit, especially Mark 7, where Topaz is kind of like a flip up. Aventurine is one of, if not the most skill point positive sustains, and if you don't have Aventurine, then either Gallagher or Luocha can be an excellent teammate for Feixiao, right? So we are now at this point going to jump straight into the team building section. Robin, I don't really think I need to say too much about here, and I think CN community is also in full agreement. With or without Robin, Feixiao is a completely different unit. If you don't have Robin for Feixiao, she legitimately does not feel like a tier 0 unit at all, right? So if you're considering of pulling for Feixiao, definitely try to at the very least get your hands on Robin first, especially with how versatile she is, not just with Feixiao, but pretty much almost every single team call with honkaistarrail right now. And in my opinion, she genuinely is the tier 0 apex support, right? Get Robin with Feixiao in order to see the absolute highest value you're gonna be getting. So we don't really need to talk about anything else. Robin is absolutely hurt, right? Now, with the Robin slot settled, that leaves our sustain slot as well as the support slot. Then for support slot, you do have 3 different choices of Topaz, Mose, and Mark 7. Between these 3 supports, who is the best support? Who has the highest amount of damage offered? So this is gonna become like the rough numbers that this content creator has provided. So in this current setup, Topaz damage output only slightly outperforms Mark 7 by roughly 10%. And in fact, Mose literally has absolute highest damage in terms of like burst damage compared to even Topaz at E0, right? So this is gonna be the multipliers. Mark 7 is the baseline, and Mose at E6 has the absolute highest team-wide damage increase at 131.21%. But that being said, there is one fatal problem with Mose, which is his actual combat experience is gonna be very demanding based on team speed tuning. Because for Mose specifically, the moment you latch onto one target, you need your allies to hit the target 9 times in order to fully deplete Mose's stack before you can go to another target. And even if you were to deplete the 9 stacks, Mose will always start the battle all the way at the start of the action value, right? He will go all the way at the start. And another thing is, the moment your target dies, Mose would go all the way to the start of the action value at the very last, similar to like Jingyuan's Lightning Lord. So this may cause a problem where you want Mose to mark the prey on another target again, and you kind of have to wait for him to go back up, right? So it can definitely be a little bit uncomfortable. Not to mention, he's also extremely skill point unfriendly. He basically generates 0 skill points for the entire battle, so you might even run into skill point problems. Mose also cannot be buffed by Robin's ultimate, so that is also another thing that you need to consider. But of course, despite all these like discomfort, the reason why Mose's damage output is so high for our entire team is absolutely because his personal damage is also exceedingly high, especially if you build Mose properly at E6. At E6, Mose in a follow-up team comp with Aventurine, Robin, and Feixiao takes up roughly 35% of the entire team's damage, which is close to what Feixiao has to offer, right? So Mose's personal damage output with the debuffs he provide at E6 properly built can be very, very strong. In fact, the strongest, considered maybe even stronger than Topaz, right? Just that you have to manage this buff wearing off and changing target, not having enough skill points, so definitely not as comfortable. So an ideal situation is basically if you are going to be in a target where there's not a lot of mobs for you to deal with. There's only like 1 or 2 mobs and you can very quickly kill the enemies very fast without letting the battle drag on for too long, then Mose is going to be an excellent choice. Whereas if you're going to be in a target where there's a lot of different units, then March 7th with her very, very positive skill point, as well as the fact that she will always launch a follow-up attack based on her Shifu, right? So her flexibility of switching targets is also a lot easier, so she can be more comfortable in a multi-enemy scenario. Then Topaz is kind of like basically the middle ground. She's good at single target damage, she's good at burst damage, she has a follow-up vulnerability, you can switch targets very easily with the proof of that, and she has also one of, if not the highest frequency of follow-ups with Nambi, right? So she's pretty much a middle ground, deal with mobs, deal with single target, very good in all these kind of scenarios. Especially if you manage to get Topaz signature like Cone as well as an E1, then her damage will be pretty much higher than Mose in every single possible way, right? So that is gonna be the 3 main follow-up slot tools if you want to run them with Feixiao. Alright, so with the follow-up Robin and support settled, then the sustain slot rank 1 definitely gonna be Aventurine. Very, very skill point positive. Shield is very, very nice. Has the crit damage debuff. Has a lot of follow-up. In fact, the highest amount of follow-up that we have seen so far. So definitely de facto rank 1 best in slot. If you don't have Aventurine, however, then these 2 men are gonna be the next best in slot case, right? Because they are both very, very skill point positive. Gallagher as well as Luocha. So Luocha is also one of, if not our most skill point positive supports. Gallagher, I would say, if the enemy is weak to fire, especially if you have like a scenario with fire weakness such as Topaz, you want to bring along, then Gallagher can definitely help us with the toughness bar breaking as well. So very, very nice, right? As well as the fact that running Quid Pro Quo Gallagher can also help our Robin generate her ultimate a little bit more comfortably. Luocha, on the other hand, is basically the most skill point positive support you have in the game, and for such a skill point heavy consumption team with Feixiao, Topaz, or even the support like Mose, then running Luocha not a bad idea, if I can say so myself, right? Then for Fu Xuan and Huan Huan, Fu Xuan specifically, she is not that skill point positive. She's basically +1 over every 3 turns. So it might not be that good, and she doesn't really have a lot of other utility aside from the crit rate. Huan Huan, she is not really the best recommended pick, although you could use her because of Robin, because of Topaz, Aventurine, all this energy can work with Huan Huan. She is one of the most skill point unfriendly unit, and like I mentioned, this flop team comp with Feixiao, it is very, very skill point demanding, right? Also, on top of that, Huan Huan is just better suited with another team comp anyway, such as Imbibitor Lune or so Yun Li. So since there's a better team that can use Huan Huan, you can just take her to the other side and leave like units like Aventurine, Luocha, all this kind of stuff to Feixiao's team. Alright, now with the team comms more or less explained, I kind of want to jump into a very interesting session, which is going to be the speed tuning for follow-up team comms. Not just follow-up, but for pretty much a lot of different team comms that you can kind of run with Feixiao, right? So how exactly does speed tuning work? So one example of a classic speed tuning that we see quite frequently is going to be the usual follow-up set, right? You want to make sure all of them are above 134. Robin, in this case, you give her 120 with order of vulnerability, she's still going to be going first. And then after Robin goes, you have Topaz, you have Feixiao, you have Aventurine. Ideally, you want Topaz to be the very first person, because then you can direct the proof of that to the target that you want, so that we can get Nambi, get the debuffs, and then Feixiao going forward after that will receive the increased damage, right? Then after you get Topaz and Feixiao and Aventurine, once the last man goes, either Aventurine or Feixiao, then you can activate Robin's ultimate to bring everybody back up, effectively giving us the 3 turns within a single wave, right? So that is going to be a speed tuning, very, very straightforward. Not too much crazy things to be explained over here. Make sure your teams are above 134 and Robin is just basically there. So this is going to be the more advanced version of the original follow-up comp, the fraud comp. 137 Feixiao. If you do have Robin's E2, then Feixiao only needs 125 speed, right? And then this is kind of like the similar, but if you hit 125 speed, you basically need 13 speed, which is 6 speed subsets, and kind of similar thing. 1.8. Every single time you lose a crit value, it's going to be a 1.8 DPS loss, and attack boots increase the total damage by 11.7%. So as long as this doesn't fall by too much, attack boots is going to be a better option for Feixiao. Right? The Aventurine, same thing, above 1, 3.4, and if you have E2 Robin, then 126 speed is going to be fine. Whether it's faster than Topaz is not that important, but ideally, if your Topaz is number 1, then everybody can get the follow-up attack buff, right? So that's going to be that. If you are faster than Feixiao, technically speaking, you are going to be able to reach your ultimate earlier, because you base attack earlier, then you can cast your ultimate. So it would be ideal if Aventurine is going to be faster than Feixiao. If you are slower than Feixiao, then it also be possible, because if you are slower than Feixiao, him triggering an attack can trigger Feixiao's follow-up one more time, right? So both of them do have their benefits and disadvantages, so you can kind of weigh them yourself. Robin, the same thing, 117 and above is fine, don't even need Von Weg, so that is gonna be our speed tuning for Feixiao's original team comp. Another team comp that we can consider is that Feixiao, without Topaz, you can run March 7. So if you are running March 7, because she does give us a speed buff, you can consider giving Feixiao a attack boost, and she only needs 128 speed with March 7 speed buff, right? But that being said, to hit 128 speed attack boost, you still need 16 speed, which is 7 speed substats. So getting this 7 speed substats can be a little bit difficult, especially at the expense of your double crit. Every single time you lose one line of crit value, it is roughly 1.8% damage loss. But attack boots does provide us a 11.7% total damage increase. So as long as you don't lose too much crit value, attack boots theoretically is going to be a better choice compared to speed boots if you can hit the threshold, right? Eventually, usual 133.4, good enough. Robin, 117 and above is fine. You don't need Von Weg, it's completely fine. March 7th, you don't need speed whatsoever. Just give her attack boots. In terms of priority, just give her attack boots. So very, very straightforward. So this is going to be the March 7th speed tuning. Now, aside from the speed tuning of our usual DPS of our follow-up units, I have two more speed tuning to kind of introduce you. One of them being a Sparkle speed tuning. This was very interesting. And I'm going to be showing you guys my run later as well. So if you want to run Sparkle with Feixiao, it is actually doable in our current Mane of Chaos 12 settings because of the amount of damage that Feixiao has. With the crit damage on Sparkle, all of the damage percentage, her ultimate can quite literally one-shot Elite super easily. So even though you might have a slightly lower ultimate uptime because of the stacks, your damage is so high that it might not even matter, right? So in this setup, Feixiao is going to be attack speed, and as long as it's above 115, it is going to be fine. For your Aventurine, 113.4 and above is going to be fine. Above of them is going to be more or less the same. But one thing to consider is, do you want to run Sparkle and Robin? Double Harmony support, you can consider dropping your sustain in the Aventurine and just go all in damage. So this could be Topaz or even March 7 just for the pure damage output, right? Nonetheless, this does give us a comfort, and the damage output is still super high, so definitely still runnable. For our Robin, now this is where it's gonna be quite interesting. Robin, if you're running Sparkle, you actually want her to run Von Weg, and you want her to reach above 135 speed. Now, the reason why you want this is because your very first Sparkle buff is not gonna be on Feixiao, it's actually gonna be on Robin instead, if you want her to guarantee the ultimate immediately. If you don't do this for Robin, then sometimes Robin might not have enough energy to cast the ultimate, right? So that's going to be a pretty big DPS loss. However, if you're in a scenario where the enemy mobs can hit you very frequently and your Robin is going to have enough energy, then you don't need to scale Robin in this regard. Nonetheless, you still want to hit above 135 speed because maybe wave 1 you don't need it, but wave 2 you will definitely need it, because this is where the wave 2, the lack of fallout damage, you can really see Robin won't have enough energy to really sustain herself to cast the ultimate for a second time. So that's when, if you have a 135 speed Robin, slapping on your Sparkle, scaling Robin instead of Feixiao can give her that one additional action for her to just do one more attack or skill, and then she can cast ultimate again, right? So this is very important if you want to run it with this team. And for Sparkle, above 160 speed, if you don't want to run Dungeon Zuns or Windset, and you also don't need Von Weg. But if you want to run Dungeon Zuns, my personal testing, I found my Sparkle to be able to achieve this with roughly 140-ish speed, so take it as you will, right? So that is going to be the speed tuning for a Sparkle setup, and feel free to try yourself. I'll show you in the video later on as well, right? And then for a Bronya setup, it is also doable. If you're running a Bronya setup with Feixiao, the concept is kind of the same with Sparkle. You just want to just give her way more buffs to just increase the overall damage. And for Bronya, she can also use her skill on Robin just to make Robin go one more time, and she can cast a skill and then cast the ultimate for our entire team. Now for Robin specifically, because her buff is 100 action value advance and it's not only 50 like Sparkle, you can just make Robin slow, right? The usual 117 speed with the buffs, all that kind of stuff, not too much crazy about. If you have a 0-1 Bronya E0S1, then your Feixiao would need speed boots and she needs to be faster than Bronya. So if your Bronya is at the absolute lowest at 133.4, which is the action required for 2 actions in the first wave, then 137 and above would be sufficient. However, if you have an E2S1 and above Bronya, which means you do get the speed buff, then Feixiao can just run an attack boots base speed, and that's going to be completely fine. You don't need Windset whatsoever. In fact, Windset set, I'm going to talk about it a little bit later on. Sometimes it's going to be even worse for you because it will basically ruin the speed tuning of your team, and you don't really want that to happen in this setup, right? So that is going to be the speed tuning required for Bronya, and with that, we've pretty much come to the end of the speed tuning portion. And I'll also be showing you guys the runs later on, right? So yep, that's going to be that. Alright, jumping into the signature weapons, I'm just going to quickly show you guys some of the numbers, right? So these are going to be the calculations from CN community. You can see that this is where if you have Feixiao's signature weapon against a doctor ratio with 3 stacks, it is almost negligible. It is literally like a 1% difference, super low. But that is assuming you do get 3 stacks. In order to consistently get 3 stacks of doctor ratio, you pretty much have to run Topaz or Mosaic, right? March 7 is not going to be able to provide the buffs for debuffs for us, so you kind of need to run them. If you only have 1 stack, then it honestly is also not even that big of a drop off. It's roughly 5% lower for a single target, but 2.7% lower for our entire team, right? So really not that bad. If you have absolutely no stack, it is still less than 10% difference for a cell and 4% difference for our entire team, right? So doctor ratio is an excellent Feixiao Litecoin substitute, so take that into consideration. Scylla, if you hit the max stacks, you're going to hit 90 and 95 for your single and team respectively. But if you do a max stack Scylla, which means that you are going to be sacrificing crit ratios for speed. And like I mentioned just now, every single time you sacrifice 1 crit ratio, it is roughly a 1.8% damage drop off. So do weigh in as to whether full stack is going to be necessary, right? Unless, of course, you have like an E2 Robin to buff your speed, all kind of stuff, then that's going to be fine. And this is going to be an S5 Xianzhou Litecoin at 89 and 94. But if you have an S5, that's going to be a little bit crazy, right? And then for the rest of the stuff, this is going to be a 4-stack Scylla at 86 and 93. This is going to be cruising the Scylla C, considering you get 40% attack buff at 85 and 92. And basically, you can kind of see, even for our absolute last options, like our 4-stars options, like our Silence Remains as well as Sword Play, it is very close to our team damage. Personal damage does fall by quite a bit because the ultimate is going to be very low, but for our overall team damage, since if you want to factor in Robin's additional damage or Topaz or Aventurine, it is still within a 10% difference. So generally, TLDR, the signature Litecoin's value is not that crazy if you have any of these substitutes, right? It's probably not going to be available, especially if we compare her to Eidolon 1, which we'll be discussing later. A few notes to consider if you want to talk about raw numbers is that number 1, your Litecoin's main stat will affect how you build Feixiao. For example, Dr. Rachel's Litecoin main stat is going to be crit damage, whereas her signature Litecoin is crit rate. And for Feixiao, crit rate is extremely important. In fact, it is more important to get as close to 100 crit as possible, since her follow-up team comp does give her a lot of crit damage, right? So if Dr. Rachel's Litecoin's main stat is crit damage, you might find it a little bit difficult to hit the optimal crit rate, right? So always consider your crit rate in your raw stats. Another thing to note is that for your cruising at SLRC, this attack percentage can only trigger if you kill something. If you don't kill something in Feixiao, then this is effectively useless. So this is gonna be the final summary. Feixiao over Dr. Ratio, over Scylla, over Yanqing's Litecoin, cruising at SLRC, only Silence Remains, Sword Play, and everything else. I will also be releasing a video where I kind of test out some of the most popular Litecoin options that Feixiao can run, so you can kind of see the differences in the future, right? So stay tuned for the video. Okay, then jumping into our Relic segment, both Duran. Then jumping into our Relic segment, Duran and Valorous is going to be the best in slot, but 4-piece Grand Duke is also going to be an extremely close substitute because our ultimate, it does hit 7 times. So for our final hit, which, like I mentioned in my earlier access review, is the highest multiplier, it will eat the full benefits of Grand Duke. So the performance is honestly really good. But at the end of the day, Valorous is still going to be the best in slot options, right? Another option to consider is also honestly going to be the 4-piece Quantum set. Now the 4-piece Quantum set, especially if you have the signature Litecoin, it can stack on defense reduction to an extremely high amount. If you have 20% defense down, if you have a Quantum enemy, that is gonna be a 74% defense down. So honestly, very strong, and in fact, it can be even stronger than Valerius, especially if you have E6, right? That's when your follow-up attacks from a talent, it also counts as ultimate damage, right? So you can consider that as well. Or in the future, like I mentioned, defense shred is always exponential scaling. If we have more defense shred options, 4-piece Quantum is gonna scale even better. It's just for now, we don't really have it. Now, there's one final set I want to talk about. It's gonna be the 4-piece Ego set. Now, 4-piece Ego set, theoretically, it does give us like more action value advance. So you could squeeze out one more action and do it for the 0 cycles or the goofy arts, one more turn, one more ultimate. That being said, it will mess up your speed tuning. Because, for example, originally, if we speed tune our Topaz to be the first unit, if we run 4-piece Ego on Feixiao and she is now faster than Topaz, then she might face a situation where the proof of that is not on the right target. Then if you want to cast your ultimate on that same target, it is going to be not optimal, right? You have to basically wait, right? So speed tuning will be affected, as well as the fact that if you want to run Sparkle, Bronya, they will all not be viable if you want to run 4-piece Ego. That being said, if you can manage the speed tuning, especially in like a 0-cycle scenario, you have the perfect handling of your speed, all that kind of stuff, then 4-piece Ego is going to be very, very good. But for beginners or players that don't want to think about speed tuning, then this is honestly not that recommended. For your Duran as well as Izumo, there's basically 2 subset worth of difference, so it's honestly extremely negligible. So whichever one has a better subset, you're pretty much going to be good to go. That being said, I do want to say that the Duran 2-piece is more efficient because the other set is going to be excellent for a super raid team. Whereas for Izumo, unless you're a pure fission enjoyer, you're not really going to use Sigonia by that much, right? So that's going to be that in terms of farming efficiency. Then for your main set subsets, it's exactly the same as our early access review. Crit or crit damage, speed boots or attack boots, wind damage sphere, attack percentage rope. So that's pretty much going to be it. Speed tuning, I've already mentioned just now, so I don't really need to talk about it that much. Alright, and finally, we have come to our Eidolon segment. For Eidolon 1, this pretty much increases our ultimate damage by roughly a whopping 32%, which brings up to Feixiao's total damage output to a 22% final damage increase, which means that this is already way more valuable compared to all of her signature Litecoin improvements, right? So even comparing it to like Screen and SLRC, Sword Play, it is still a roughly 10% increment if you want to compare it to signature Litecoin. So this Eidolon 1 definitely has way more value for Feixiao compared to the signature Litecoin 1. As well as the fact that if you consider our entire team, there's going to be a team-wide damage of 14% if you factor Robin, Topaz, all the debuffs from Adventuring, right? So that's going to be very nice. Now, Feixiao's E2 is pretty much the equivalent of E2 Acheron as well as E2 Imperial or even E2 Firefly, right? This completely changes the kit, a whopping 50% increase in your personal damage because you basically cast your ultimate almost twice as fast with a follow-up team comp. Of course, the catch is this will need us to run her in a scenario where we have a lot of follow-up attacks. So this E2's impact, it will be most prominent if we run her in a Topaz, Adventuring, and Robin follow-up. And you can see the team-wide damage is going to be a 35% team-wide damage increase. If you don't run her with a follow-up team comp, then this Eidolon 2's value will definitely go down by a little bit, right? So it depends on the number of follow-ups we have. And for E3, E4, E5, not too crazy. Pretty much a roughly 10% team-wide damage increase. So not really going to talk about that. For our E4, it's going to be pretty good for modes like Apocalyptic Shadows because of the toughness breaking. Other than that, nothing too crazy to know about. Then E6 is gonna be her final Eidolon, which is pretty much equivalent to Acheron's Eidolon as well. Ignores 20% of rest as well as the fact that your talent now constitutes as a ultimate damage, which means that she can get the 54% defense reduction from the signature Litecoin, right? So pretty much one of, if not the most powerful Eidolons for Feixiao, around a 38% final damage increase, right? So that is gonna be that for the Eidolons, and then for every single Litecoin's position is roughly a 5% damage increase. So very quickly, just before I wrap up this entire video, I kind of want to showcase the ability that Feixiao has that completely places her in a different level in our current Memory of Chaos setup. Like I mentioned earlier in my video just now, the damage that Feixiao does right now is so incredibly high that the current endgame stage is too weak for us to fully utilize the kit, right? I'm sure you've already seen some crazy zero cycles Feixiao. She's one of, if not the easiest unit to zero cycle at this current moment because the damage is so high. So I'm going to be showing you guys a couple of a zero cycle. So this is the one with Mark 7. So I'll just put the Kafka part out. You can see that going into Kafka, we already have 12 stacks of our ultimate at the ready. So we will immediately do a follow-up. Luckily land on Kafka. Mark 7 does another follow-up for herself. And once we do this to Kafka, we are pretty much guaranteed to break her. So you can see that the damage we're dealing with Feixiao over here, basically how our toughness bar is gone. One more follow-up from Mark 7, and then into another ultimate of Feixiao, we are pretty much going to break Kafka instantly. So there's going to be zero mind control RNG, immediately breaking her, so she's not even going to be able to touch our Feixiao, right? So this is going to be something that we can do, especially if the enemy is weak to imaginary. So we can use this to basically almost one-shot the target, right? You can see she's basically down 1% HP. She might as well be dead from a full Feixiao into a March 7th chain, right? So that's gonna be a team comp you can consider if you don't have Topaz. I'm only gonna be showing you guys team comps that we don't have Topaz about, right? So let's skip this a little bit. It is basically gonna be a 0 cycle with a lot of action. You can see that with our Robin's ultimate, we still have our Feixiao's extra turn, Aventrine, March 7th, they can all go for an extra turn, but I just kind of just wrap it up. So we have a lot of excess damage, right, from this specific setup. Of course, my Robin unfortunately is E1, but just take it away and you can still definitely have a lot of time left to just deal the damage needed, right? So that's gonna be our March 7th team comp with Feixiao. Then jumping into another team comp I kind of want to show you guys is going to be the Sparkle team comp, which is honestly very interesting. Alright, so for the Sparkle team comp, like I mentioned, you do want to speed tune properly. Your Robin over here, you want her to be on the Von Wax set with 135 speed and above, right? So in this specific setup, we can use Sparkle to skill Robin back up in order for us to cast our skill again, right? In this specific run, you'll notice that I didn't really need it because even if my Sparkle skills Robin up here, I would have already gotten the full energy with Feixiao instead, right? So if I were to skill Robin there, it was kind of a waste because all our follow-ups here, Robin would already get the maximum energy, get the ultimate. So I didn't use my Sparkle skill on Robin in that exact scenario. But you can see the value of Sparkle later on in the second stage, right? So now we get Robin's ultimate. We still have a lot of damage, a lot of skill points actually. Sparkle also potentially fixes one of our skill point issues. So now we can basically spend our skill with no worry in the world. Very easy follow-up. And you can kind of see that the damage we're getting from Feixiao is also going to be quite high, especially with Sparkle's crit damage buff, right? And we haven't even activated the ultimate. 637,000 at E0 S1, very nice. Then jump into this phase, you can kind of see I did run my Sparkle with Duns Duns. So if you don't have Sparkle with Duns Duns, you might face an issue where your enemy will hit you. For example, Kafka, the guy will hit you, will mind control, so that could be a little bit annoying. So Duns Duns does have quite a bit of utility over here. I'm going to be using our Aventrine Sit over here, and you can see that the damage we're dealing with Feixiao is already at 61% Kafka, and the moment we do our attack over here, we are pretty much gonna kill Kafka even if we don't Witness Break her, right? This is with our Sparkle, which is why I say the mobs that we have right now, they're just a little bit too weak. And Kafka can't even sustain a single hit from Feixiao even when you're not running a follow-up team. The damage multiplier for Feixiao is just super high. So this is where you can see Sparkle's value. So Robin goes, but you can see Robin doesn't reach the next turn, right? You can see, but once we buff Robin up, Robin does in fact move into the same wave. So we can now gain Robin's extra action just in case we don't get hit enough. Luckily for us, the guy actually does hit Robin enough, so even if we didn't bring Robin up, we could have gotten the energy. So you can see her energy is basically maxed out, but I just wanted to be safe, so I gave Robin a buff from Sparkle. So, but this is essentially how the team can work. If you want to run Sparkle with Feixiao, you need to remember to use the Sparkle skill for Robin in case she cannot get enough energy to cast ultimate. But if you have enough, then feel free to allocate your buffs to Feixiao and just watch like a ridiculous amount of damage from the ultimate, right? So this is gonna be all the buffs, all the skills, all the stuff. I didn't even have enough for the ultimate, so one single skill is already 137,000. So that is for the Sparkle team comp. Then this is going to be the one I did with Bronya. So Bronya, honestly, very similar mechanic with Sparkle. Not too much to be said there. You want to cast your skill on the Feixiao. My Bronya is in fact an E3, so my Feixiao is going to be running attack boots just for a little bit more burst. If you do have an E0 Bronya, then running speed boots will be more preferable. It's kind of like playing her like a Jingliu. So Sparkle, so Feixiao, Bronya, Feixiao, very straightforward. Sometimes, just like Sparkle, you also want to use your Bronya's skill on Robin instead, because Robin's ultimate is the most important one, right? So you can see over here, my Robin didn't really have enough, but because we have so much leeway, I know for a fact I'm going to be able to clear this the moment I get enough energy, right? So not too much to be worried about. Maybe in the future this might change, but if you don't have enough energy for Robin to cast the ultimate immediately, then you want to use Bronya's skill to buff Robin instead. At this point, I'm just generating skill points, generating energy, chilling. Only at the absolute last second, then will I cast Robin's ultimate just to get the absolute highest value for my entire team. More skill points, more energy, right? So over here, I cast it, and then I can very easily just get rid of everyone over here. 11 seconds of Feixiao. I'm just going to get a little bit more skill points because it's a little bit tight. Especially if you run Bronya, your skill points definitely can be an issue. So this is going to be a hit with a Bronya. Don't really have the Bronya buff anymore because it's not E6 Bronya, but it's still quite nice with the Aventrine follow-up, and we're just going to basic attack, get some skills, get some points going into the next wave, right? So one follow-up, boom. So now we are going to go into Kafka. Aventrine instantly pops his ultimate onto Kafka, getting the break over here, and we are going to be able to hopefully use our ultimate to instantly kill Kafka. I'm not sure if it's going to be enough. Hopefully it's going to be enough. So I see boom. not gonna be enough, right? But fortunately for us, because we do have Bronya, even if Kafka mind control Feixiao, we can very, very easily cleanse her, since Bronya is the only unit in our entire team that can cleanse her. Luckily for us, she hit Aventurine, but just in case she hits Feixiao, Bronya can be a very easy fix. So you can see back there, even if that was Feixiao that got mind control, Bronya fixes it and no issues whatsoever. So now we are going to be able to get Bronya's crit damage buff as well as the damage percentage buff from this one follow-up into this follow-up from Aventurine. Boom, one ultimate. Kafka is basically dead, so I'm just going to divert my attention to the Wolf into a big hit over here. Boom, 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 boom. Extremely overpowered damage. No elites is going to survive this, right? So you can see my Robin is gonna run out of turns, but just in case we didn't have enough energy for our Robin, my Bronya can just then cast skill for Robin again to get us another extra turn. But because we are dealing so much damage, we honestly did not even need it, right? So that's gonna be the Bronya team comp. And just one last thing I kind of want to show to prove a point of how much damage Feixiao can do. I'm gonna be running her with Runmei, which technically should be anti-synergistic because now we have no buffs of Robin, no buffs from like no action value advanced boosters such as Sparkle or Bronya. But I can see that the amount of damage we're dealing is still so goddamn high that it doesn't even matter. So you can see over here, eventually just gonna base it into a 130k, very, very nice. Popping off the ultimate to cast the debuff on Kafka, and you can kind of just see how much damage our Feixiao is going to be doing here with a Runmei support plus the all-type rest pen, the defense arm from the E1 Runmei. And let's just see the damage, right? So this is before Kafka is witness broken, and we are already dealing close to, what is it, 600,000, and now casting our ultimate again, instantly taken away, and now this witness broken is going to be even higher, coming to a whopping 770,000 damage. Kafka just completely wiped out the face of the planet Earth. So you can see that the damage multipliers for Feixiao, I've said it again and again, is so high that it doesn't even matter at this point to not run her with a follow-up team, right? Her damage is just so high, right? So not the best team right now, but because since almost every single comp we have in Honkai Starbucks can allow Feixiao to zero cycle, it can be a little bit difficult to really see the value of a follow-up team, right? So that is gonna be that, and I'll leave it to you guys to decide what team you want to run with Feixiao. And with that, we have come to the end of this episode's CN unit analysis featuring Feixiao. Word of the day is gonna be burst, because holy shit, that's a lot of burst damage, right? So join Discord, join YouTube, join Twitch. All the best for Feixiao pools. Hope you guys enjoy her because I surely am enjoying her a lot, right? So that's all for today, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.